everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Search Off the Record podcast. Our plan is to talk a bit about what's happening at Google Search, how things work behind the scenes, and who knows, maybe have some fun along the way. My name is John Mueller. I'm a search advocate here at Google in Switzerland on the Search Relations team. I'm joined here today by Martin and Gary, also on the Search Relations team.
Buen dia.
And we have a special guest today, Pascal. Pascal, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hey, John. Thanks for having me. So my name's Pascal Birchler. I'm also based in Switzerland, and I work at Google in the CMS Relations team. My focus there is on CMSs like WordPress and technologies like AMP and web stories.
Oh, cool. It's so cool to have you on the podcast, Pascal. That's really, really awesome. And also for those who don't know you and don't know our office setup, where would you be sitting in the office? You're in which building, where you're hanging out? Are you hanging out with the cool kids?
Well, I'm hanging out with you all in the office. So if you consider yourself to be the cool kids, then yes.
So no. Okay, that's very fine. Oh, I love how Gary does not like this response. Anyway, so you said you're working with WordPress and that you are doing like AMP and web stories. What part do you like the best? What's the most interesting, as you think?
I like how we are combining all these things. So we started with bringing AMP to WordPress with the official AMP plugin for WordPress. And now we're bringing web stories to WordPress using a visual editor and web stories that are also powered by AMP under the hood.
That's damn cool.
Why did we pick WordPress? Like, why not Drupal or Blogger? How did we end up using WordPress? Is it just that people love WordPress, or what's the deal?
I think it started because WordPress has a huge market share in the CMS space for like self-hosted CMSs. And we have lots of WordPress experience already on the team. And that's how we started working with AMP and web stories in WordPress.
So cool. I mean, it feels like something where if we can help improve WordPress, then that's something that could help a lot of sites, right? Makes it easier.
Absolutely, yeah. That doesn't mean, of course, that we're not working with other CMS platforms as well. We also contribute to, let's say, Drupal or Joomla. So yeah.
Cool.
So I know that I am missing the office. How about you? Do you miss the office?
I certainly miss seeing you all in the office because we don't usually work together. So that is our usual interaction in the office. It's just so different now with working from home. So I really appreciate being here.
Oh, we appreciate you being here. And I definitely do miss our shared coffees on the roof terrace. That's for sure.
And the horse. Don't forget the horse.
And the horse. And Spock.
Last time I was in the office, the horse didn't look really well.
Yeah, it has a headache.
You could say so, yes. And it was wearing a mask,
What the heck are you talking about?
Gary, you should take a rotation day just to see the office. It's a bit of a different...
I don't want to go out. I'm perfectly fine here in my lair.
Fair enough. My lair.
I don't know. I think it was like... It fell. I don't know.
Oh. And as we all know, once horses fall, it's very hard to get them back up.
Actually, Gary, would you like to continue our conversation on indexing? Because I'm wondering generally, like, what else is there in the pipeline? And also, how does AMP fit into that?
No.
Okay. That's...
Yes, please tell us more, Gary. No and?
Okay, so let's continue with the indexing theme. Actually, let's step back a little. We already talked about content conversion, and there we covered a few special cases like PDFs, for which we have special plugins that we use to convert to HTML. But then we have other kinds of media that are even more special than PDFs in some sense. For example, we have images, and images are kind of special from the point of view that they are truly binary format and they are very hard to understand for machines. So for images particularly, we have a completely different indexing mechanism. I'm not going to give a name for that because I don't think we ever did, and I don't want to call it Fred because Fred is special. But what we do is during content conversion, we extract the image tags, essentially, also from some other image sources, and then pass those image URLs on to this special image indexer. And then there some magic happens. There we do some image intelligence or image recognition, for example. Don't overthink it because it's not perfect and it's not there yet, essentially. Basically, it can tell, for example, an apple from a banana. But if you show it, I don't know, Appenzell cheese or Parmigiano, it will not be able to tell them apart, unlike Pascal, for example. Then, again, stepping back to Converter, we also extract videos there or metadata about videos. And that's, again, a very special format because while with images you have basically one image, with videos you typically have about 24 images per second that you would have to process to understand what the heck is going on in the video. On top of that, you also have the audio track that you might need to process to understand what's in the video. And this is not easy task. This is actually quite hard task. It is done by the same indexing mechanism that we use for images as well, but it gets way more complicated with videos. And then, again, stepping back to Converter, we have, for example, AMP. AMP, unless it's canonical, basically standalone AMP, we don't index it. And I know that that's a shocker, but essentially AMP is just an alternate format that we present for searchers in our search results for our users. If it's standalone AMP, basically canonical AMP, then we will just treat it as HTML and it gets indexed potentially just like an HTML page would be indexed. And then what else do we do with AMP?
We badge it in the search results, right?
Yes, but that's just a special badge that we apply to AMP.
I mean, people are hypothesizing that this is also like a ranking thing, but it isn't as far as I'm aware.
No, AMP is not on its own a ranking signal.
Right. Cool. Wow. I mean, I asked about AMP and I got images, videos, and AMP. So that was a nice bonus. But do you know how we are dealing with web stories? Because I know that we are showing them in like Discover and stuff. And I'm not exactly sure how we are showing them in SERPs right now. But I think like we are showing them separately too, as in like in a special way.
I have literally no idea.
Oh my. Okay.
But the good thing is that we have Pascal here who probably knows.
True. Pascal, I kind of jumped ahead here and jumped into web stories. Would you like to explain to us how they work, what they are?
Yes, sure. So I think you kind of hinted at this a little bit. So web stories are powered by AMP. They're built on top of AMP. So they are canonical AMP pages. And as Gary said, they're like regular web pages that can be indexed. And as you mentioned, they can be found via search or also Discover. I think even in image search, you'll see images that are like part of stories, and then you can open a story. So there's a variety of ways where they can be found.
That's pretty cool. And you're saying they're built with AMP. So I'm guessing web stories, how does a web story look like? How can I imagine a web story to be like? What is it like? Is there anything comparable?
So from the user point of view, it looks like you would imagine a story. It looks like a story you would see on, let's say, Instagram or Facebook or other platforms that have this story format.
Right.
It's just brought to the web. So you have the same controls like arrows to navigate or like a mute button.
Oh, that's cool. So basically, I can create stories similar to those created in these walled gardens like Instagram, Facebook, and all the others. But I can do that on my website.
Precisely, yeah. It's on your website, your server, and you're in full control, which means they don't have to disappear after 24 hours, for example.
Nice, because I really, really don't like that. That's like the worst part about stories. You're like, oh, this is an amazing story. And then, bloop, gone it is forever.
So how does it work with the individual pages? Are they separate URLs, or is it one document which has all of those individual pages for the story in it?
So it's one document with all the pages in it. So the URL doesn't change when you navigate between pages.
So cool. So do you have to make these manually at the moment, or is there some tool out there that helps?
Great question. Luckily, coincidentally, I work on a tool to create stories. You could, of course, create these manually, but I mean, would you create a website manually these days? You probably have some kind of tool or CMS to do this.
No, I'm actually doing it by hand. I love coding by hand HTML because it's one of the best things that was invented for humans.
Sure, Gary. Okay. You and the 7 other people.
Well, actually, fun story. And we should have talked about this with our tech writer, Lizzie. But for the dev site, for developers.google.com, we are actually creating HTML. And we are creating HTML by hand. So whenever we publish something on developers.google.com, we are literally by hand creating HTML.
Wow. So old school, Gary.
I know. Wait, did you just call me old?
Gary Old.
Okay, never mind.
And he's a man, so he's Gary Oldman now. I have to also say, actually, I didn't expect to be on Team Gary here, but hey, here we go. I'm on Team Gary now because I really do like hand coding HTML as well.
What the heck?
I know, right? I can't believe it either. And I have to say, I built a web story a while ago just to like try it out. And I have to say, it was quite a fun experience. It's a lot more visual than, I mean, building websites is a visual process because the outcome is visual, but you are working a lot more with images and animations and videos and much more visual content. So while I liked it, like hand coding an AMP story, because it's basically built on custom elements and web components, it's really nice and easy to build these things. And I think the outcome is beautiful, much more beautiful than it would be if I would build it just without the entire framework of the AMP components around it. But I do wish for a visual editor. Honestly. So I think if you're building that into WordPress, that's really cool. But will we get that outside of WordPress as well? Maybe, please?
So yeah, as you said, this visual editor we're building is part of WordPress. So it's a WordPress plugin that you can install. But there are other tools available already today that are separate or standalone. Those are platforms like Make Stories or Newsroom AI, where you can create a story independent from your website. But you can still... Like you could export the story and then still host it on your server, for example.
Yeah, because in the end, it's a bunch of images and HTML. It's basically a static web content, right?
Yeah, very easy to move around.
That is cool stuff.
I imagine creating an editor like this in WordPress is pretty tricky because WordPress can get pretty complicated, right? Or like, how are you managing that? Is the hard part doing the visual editing or the hard part integrating all of that into WordPress?
So the editing part is rather straightforward. We built it in a way that we could also, let's say, port it to Drupal or other CMSs if we would want to in the future. The integration with WordPress is tricky because if you install WordPress, you can install plugins, you can install themes. So every WordPress site is really unique, and this can cause, of course, like integration issues with other plugins. So you have to be really careful to get it to work everywhere.
So cool. And is this going to be open source or is it going to be something unique to Google?
No, this WordPress plugin is completely open source. It's available on GitHub. And actually all the product specifications and roadmap, etc., it's all open source there as well.
Wow. So cool. So cool. Okay. I need to try that out.
I'm thinking here, this is kind of like an SEO podcast because we talk about search engines and optimizations and whatnot. I mean, like literally optimizing search engines, not the pages. But if we flip this and we want to do SEO for web stories, how would I go about that?
Great question.
I know, I get that a lot.
So because they're regular web pages, you kind of should do like the usual things for making sure stories can be found and searched, like meta description or schema.org metadata, things like that. There are some additional things wanted to be valid AMP. So the AMP story format requires things like a poster image to be set for a story or a publisher logo to be set. Without these, it wouldn't be valid AMP. And I'm sure a story that is not valid AMP will be treated differently, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Did you create the story using the WordPress plugin, or was it the manually assembled one?
Oh, I gotta admit that I haven't used the WordPress story editor because my website's not using WordPress. I know.
You use Search Console to test it, right?
Yeah, Sure,
Okay.
I'm using
Ooh,
Google Search
okay.
Console.
Cool.
But I basically took something that was a talk of mine and used the visuals to put together a web story version of a talk on developer tools for Google Search and basically how to debug things. And it's a very visual thing with lots of screenshots. And I used the different text effects and animations. And it looks really good, and it's a lot easier to do this with the AMP components than actually building this yourself and making or trying to make it performant. So it was a really good experience, and the outcome was really good. And that's the first moment I had discovered traffic in Search Console. Like Search Console gave me the performance report on my discovered traffic performance, and that was really, really fun.
So cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know. Talking about Search Console, one of the things that I hear every now and then, or I get questions about every now and then, probably some of you as well, is like, when is Google going to launch whatever next new thing? Or what is Google planning to launch next week? Kind of thing. And I thought I would talk very briefly about how we work around these launches or how we plan them, all of that. Especially when it comes to things like Search Console. Some of this kind of applies to other parts of Google as well, to search or other products too. But I just see it mostly with Search Console. Essentially, when it comes to these products, I see that we kind of make a roadmap fairly early on so that we can plan our engineering time, which makes sense because like you can't just throw up a new feature from one day to the next. And then essentially the work is kind of set rolling and it started from there. And that's something where the launch date isn't something that we fix and say, this is going to launch on exactly this date, but rather we'll try to launch it as soon as it's ready. And because of that, as soon as it's ready part, it's really hard to have launch dates ahead of time. And when people come to us and say, well, I would like to know what's happening next week or next month, what's launching then sometimes it's really hard to give that information, even internally. Externally, it's, I think, even harder because people have all of these expectations then, and they kind of watch out for that launch that they're waiting for. And we say, like, it's going to happen on this date, and then it doesn't happen on that date because it's not ready yet. Then that's all kind of annoying. That's something that I think is also a bit tricky because sometimes there are aspects that come into play fairly late in the product, in the design or in the finishing of the product, where maybe there's a legal or a policy review happening just briefly before launch. And for whatever reason, one of those reviews says, oh, we need to change some things, or we need to make this a little bit better, or make this a little bit clearer. And sometimes that can push back a launch by several months even. So even when we do things like trusted tester launches, where we kind of try things out early on, it can still take a significant amount of time until things are actually launched. So because of that, it's really hard for people to come to us and say, hey, I'd like to know what's happening next week, or can you give us a heads up or preview of what you're going to launch now? Then oftentimes we don't really have any of those details that we can share. I think one exception that comes into play is when there's something tied to a specific external event. With Search Console, that's pretty rare, but it could also happen. So for example, on May the 4th, I think last year or the year before, like I have no idea how time flies anymore. Everything is weird now. But on May the 4th, we did a Star Wars theme thing in Search Console. And of course, that had to be ready on that date. We couldn't do the May the 4th features on May the 15th. It's like nobody would have noticed or figured out what that was supposed to be about. That's kind of the one thing there. I think with the hardware products that we have, they're a little bit more tied to the consumer dates around Christmas or when things have to be ready, all of that. But Search Console isn't really tied to any of those dates. One other thing that also comes into play with regards to launches is we have regular launch freezes at Google. And these are specific times of the year where we know that a lot of the teams are on vacation and we want to make sure that we don't launch anything during that time. So during those specific times, we tend to hold back all of the launches so that we don't run into any problems accidentally. Usually that's around end of the year, around Christmas time, where we would say, well, everything until this date in December can be launched. And then from January, some date, things can launch again as well. There's a weird story around this. I think right around the time part of the Search Console team moved to Tel Aviv, where they said, well, we don't really care about the end of the year time. That's not our holiday season, so we will just continue launching anyway, which was kind of awkward because these are broader dates. But I think what happened there in the end is that we just decided, well, we really need to stick to these dates because it's not just one team that's working on the launch. There's lots of teams at Google that kind of play into that as well, where something could go wrong in one of the infrastructure sides of Google, and that might be something that you rely on for a launch. I think kind of with regards to launches and Search Console, that's kind of how it goes. I wish there were an easier answer where we could just like tell people at a conference is like, by the way, we're going to launch this cool feature tomorrow, but it just doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, we can't do that.
Well, Daniel had a really easy answer for these questions at the Webmaster Conference in Zurich 2019, where he basically every single question he got regarding launches just was answered with, no. And that was his easy answer regarding launches in Search Console.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, and when I say Daniel, I mean Daniel Weisberg, who is also on our team, and he is mostly our expert on Google Search Console and does these Google Search Console training videos on our channel as well. And he was also part of the Webmaster Conference in Zurich last year.
I mean, it's also something where I'd love to tell people some of the stuff that we're working on, because I think some of these things are really cool and exciting, but you never really know when exactly things will be ready. And then you make everyone excited about something, and then it's like, actually, maybe next year, which is like super frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lose-lose situation kind of thing, right? If we are announcing something and it doesn't happen, then people are annoyed. And if we announce something early on, then people might forget about it, or, you know, the enthusiasm might die down, or
Yeah.
So these freezes, what do they affect? Like you already said that, for example, Search Console will probably not launch new things. And even in infrastructure, we are not doing new things. But how about ranking?
How about ranking? I don't know, Gary. You're like the ranking person. It's like, you should know this.
Well, but I asked you specifically because you were talking about this.
Okay, I have no idea how the ranking side of things works there. I think the one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the ranking stuff, a lot of the search results side of things is purely algorithmic and automatic. So if the web changes on Christmas Day or on the 1st of January, then we're going to reflect that in search automatically. It might be that we don't make any new algorithms or new launches during that time, but the rest of the systems continue to work automatically, right? So from that point of view, you'll continue to see changes in search during the time when we don't make any algorithm updates, just because like the whole web continues to evolve and change all the time.
Yes.
Is that what you were looking for?
Yes.
Woohoo! Wow. Okay.
And speaking of the world changing and evolving all the time and surprise launches, the sheep on the neighbor's lawn are back.
Whoa.
I was really, really excited. They recently just came back.
Wow. The sheep update.
Wait, did you say sheep or ship?
Sheep, not ship.
Like meh.
Yeah, yeah.
You shipped the sheep?
They shipped the sheep, indeed. Yes.
Why do you have sheep?
Yeah, I should probably give a little bit of background for those of you who haven't heard of the sheep before. I mean, probably most of you have heard about the sheep, but the sheep that my neighbors use to mow their lawn, basically. So we have a building next to ours that has a pretty large lawn surface around it. And so far, they have been very spotty on actually mowing the lawn. So it has always looked a little wild, I would say, which the neighboring cats loved because they were hunting mice and stuff in there. But I guess that at some point, someone might have decided that it would be good to do a little bit of lawn care here. And I think right after the lockdown started, I was live streaming on Twitch while I was doing Rendertron work. And then there was like this really annoying thumping sound that repeated every couple of minutes. And it was really loud as well. And I apologized to my viewers, and I took a look outside, and I'm like, I'm not sure what they're building, but it looks like they're building a fence. But why? There is already a fence. And then I noticed the specific kind of fence looked very much like the kind of fence that I know from my childhood growing up in rural Germany. I'm like, are they putting sheep or goats or something on here? And I guess you wouldn't put goats on a lawn to mow it because goats kind of like rip out the entire thing with the roots, and that kind of ruins a lawn very easily.
Also, they jump a lot.
That's also true.
Climb.
Yeah, that's true. They might jump out and then just like climb on the cars or something, which would be fun. Would probably discourage people to use cars in the city, which I would like.
My favorite picture in my head right now is from a time when I was in Morocco for vacation, and there were these goats on trees.
Yeah.
Like,
What?
it was on the edge of the Sahara, very few trees, and all the trees looked quite pathetic, like they were not very happy about the Sahara situation. And then these goats were on the branches up in the tree, eating those few leaves that were still on the tree.
It's a little like the movie The Birds, but with like goats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was a surreal picture.
It's bizarre. So yeah, and I was right. They actually put sheep on the lawn. I was really excited and elated about it. And then they had the sheep here for like a week or two. And then the sheep were done with mowing the lawn, well, eating basically the lawn away. And then they were gone. One morning I heard a lot of "ma, ma," and I was like, what's happening here? And then they were gone.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I couldn't catch that.
Anyway, so yeah, they're back and I'm really excited. I'll keep you posted on how long they'll be here and I'll go there and pet them for you all.
Woohoo.
Thank you. This is very important for us.
Could you perhaps set up a webcam? Yeah.
Could I set up a webcam? I knew you would ask that. I might actually.
Oh, wow. The sheep
It's
update.
a good idea. And as we speak, they're coming around the house because they have a really large area that they can cover. So normally they sleep on the other side of the house. I'm not exactly sure why, but I will investigate.
This sounds like a perfect topic for a web story, Martin.
Yes.
I can also set up a WordPress site for you.
Oh, please do. I will love that. I'll get a funny domain name for it. They're so cute, but they're a lot thinner than they were in like April.
Well, yeah.
Good that they're here. I'll make sure that they are well fed.
You're not supposed to feed them. Come on.
Well, if I feed them, then they don't eat as much grass, which means they stay longer.
Uh-huh.
See, I have it all worked out. After last time's disappointment of them being gone so quickly, I have it all worked out. I'll make sure that they stay longer this time.
Oh, my God.
God, they're so cute.
I think we should just cut off here now. Martin is totally distracted now.
They're so fluffy.
Yeah, this is going sideways.
No, it's going forward towards the sheep.
All right. Someone mute Martin. Quick.
I can see them.
Thank you for joining us here, Pascal. It's been great having you here. It's cool to hear about WordPress and web stories. Looking forward to trying that out a little bit more. In general, we've been having fun with these podcast episodes. I hope you, the listener, have found them both entertaining and insightful too. And let us know how you're liking these, if the topics that we talk about are useful to you. And if not, give us some ideas of what we could be doing differently. Feel free to drop us a note on Twitter or chat with us at any of the online conferences that we go to. Unfortunately, like the physical conferences still aren't happening. Or maybe just stick to Twitter. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe and share this podcast with others. Thank you and bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Gracias por escuchar.